good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I think from the chat box, I can see that people are joining from all around. It would be great if you guys can indeed continue using the chat box to introduce yourselves. I'm very excited for this training workshop, as we call it, and more excited to have our trainer join us. We have Adam Kessler, who's going to be the trainer for today. Adam is one of the founders and managing partners for DevLearn. He is a monitoring and evaluation specialist with extensive experience in supporting programs to apply practical results measurement solutions based on their context. So I'm very excited to have Adam here with us. He's also an established results measurement trainer who offers an online MEL training, which has been taken by over 1,000 people from around 30 different countries. So thanks, Adam, for joining us today. And I'm also pleased to welcome Rory Tews, who is going to join Adam in answering some of the questions as we get. Rory is a sociologist by training and was one of the key figures in developing the impact-linked finance approach when he was working for Roots of Impact. Since then, he has been working as a consultant for the last 3 years, particularly in developing tech and data solutions for impact. So thank you also, Rory, for joining us today. I'm going to hand over soon to Adam, but before that, let me just remind you that please use the chat box to continue using the chat box to introduce yourselves. But if you have specific questions and answers, please use the Q&A features so that we can use it to go through the questions and answer some of them while we take in the questions. So I will hand it over to you now, Adam.
Great. Hi, everyone. It is nice to see you all on here and to see some familiar faces in the attendees list. I should say up front, this is possibly the largest webinar I've run, and in some ways it's also the most complicated in terms of the exercises we're going to be doing and the interactions I want you all to have. Meanwhile, my neighbors have chosen today to start drilling through the wall. So if there are any technical difficulties, please bear with us and we'll get through them. So just to set the scene of what we're discussing, there's an old joke about artificial intelligence, that artificial intelligence refers to anything that computers can't do yet. So 10 years ago, artificial intelligence, people thought about playing chess as artificial intelligence, maybe 20 years. Now chess is something that computers can do on your smartphone. We don't think of it as AI anymore. Similarly, people used to think about image recognition as artificial intelligence, and now it's pretty common among computer programs. So it doesn't have a particularly well-defined kind of thing, but we're basically talking about the whole range of chatbots which have come out in the last year, which can mimic human ability to use language and images. And we're going to be looking very concretely at how can it be used in your work today to improve the results measurement that you're doing. We've got a quick poll to just see how many of you are already using AI chatbot tools. And so Ella, could you please launch the poll? Good, the poll is launched, so you should be able to see. So answer the poll. And then I'd also be really interested if you could type in the chat box, what exactly do you use them for, especially if you use them regularly? Cool. So Alev uses them to write proposals and develop learning curriculums. Good. And I think most people, so I can click on end poll, I hope, and that will show the answers. Is that right, Ella?
Yes.
Good. So there's a lot of interesting data analysis, a lot of like proposal writing, writing code. So a lot of things people are using it for. So we're going to talk through some of the basic use cases. Hopefully, even if you are using it already, you'll pick up some tips and hints which can strengthen what you're already doing. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to go into a quick presentation. Before we practice using it, I want to just demonstrate to people what exactly, like to highlight a few kind of initial thoughts on the current status of chatbots and some tips and risks that you should be aware of before we go any further. So the basic thing to know about chatbots is that they basically work as a inexhaustible, friendly intern. They are really good at doing a whole range of tasks. They never sleep. They are always on hand to give advice, offer suggestions, to write proposals for you, or do bits of data analysis. So chatbots can do most things, I find, as well as most people, which is to say, if I pick a random person off the street and ask them to write a proposal or to develop a list of indicators, the chatbot will probably do better than the random person I ask off the street. This applies to almost any MEL task you can imagine, anything which doesn't involve a kind of direct, face-to-face interaction with other people. So anything from framework design to data analysis, report writing, a lot of the things people said in the chat. However, because they act kind of like a really high-performing intern, this means there are real limitations to what they can do. And one big one, which you will be happy to hear, is that chatbots are not able to do your job. You can't just get a chatbot and expect it to perform as well as you, to produce stuff to the same level of quality of you as you do. And this is partly because the chatbots are just not as good as professional in their particular context, but also the chatbot doesn't have all the context that you have. You will have been working in the sector for a number of years. You will have been working in your organization for many years. And this gives you some really important context, which the chatbot just doesn't have available to them. So a chatbot will supplement your work and make it better in certain ways, but it's certainly not a replacement for you. So two other limitations to chatbots. Firstly is its ability to integrate into Office environments. If you've used ChatGPT, you'll know that you need to go separately to another window on your browser, you talk to it, but it doesn't have access to your documents, your emails. It doesn't integrate into everything else you do at work. And secondly, chatbots hallucinate. This is a technical term for making stuff up, which is a problem we don't often find with real life humans. But chatbots can either get things wrong or just make up facts which don't really exist. One nice example, which came up when I was preparing this webinar series, actually, is I asked ChatGPT to give me a downloadable Excel file. I was trying to generate some data, which we'll use in a later exercise. And you'll see in the picture is what it gave me. Rather than give me an Excel file, it gave me an image of an Excel file superimposed on a background of Pakistani livestock farmers. So although it's kind of in the right domain, it definitely doesn't always get things right. You always need to check its work. If we're talking about what they can't do, although this webinar isn't about the future, it is worth saying the future is likely to be quite different. If you look at the amount of investment going into AI, it has, as you can imagine, skyrocketed in the last 5 years. And the quality of these systems has changed dramatically. The quote on the left is from GPT-2 from 2019. If you ask it to tell you one interesting fact about salmon, and you'll see that it gets the structure of an English sentence, but it doesn't actually make any sense. There's no content there. By contrast, on the right is GPT-4, and now you have actually a surprisingly interesting fact about salmon. So in the last 5 years, the technology has gone from effectively not producing anything to producing really well-written text. So what things will be like in 5 years' time is not something I can really speculate on from knowledge, but they're likely to keep on improving. I've got one slide of tips and risks, which I wanted to go through as a kind of preamble to getting into the tests. So the first tip is to understand what AI can and can't do. The major problems I've seen with AI so far have been when people misinterpret what it can do for them. They think it can do more than it really can. So I've seen people try and write proposals purely from AI, and it comes up with gibberish, and they submit it to the donor because they didn't check its work carefully enough, or it made references. They didn't check the references, and so they end up submitting references which weren't there. So the AI can improve what you're doing. It can save you time, but it's not a replacement for your job. I think if you're using AI professionally and you can afford it, then I really suggest using the paid for version or asking your work to pay for it. There's a real difference in quality if you're doing more technical work between what you get if you pay about $20 a month for it and what you get off on the free versions. And it's important to look at the prompt and how good the prompt is. By prompt, we mean what exactly are you telling the chatbot? How are you trying to get it to do your work? And a good prompt will do a couple of things. It will firstly tell the chatbot who it is. So it will say something like, you're an expert in writing proposals for international development projects. It will set the context. We talked about chatbots not having context. You need to give it to them. And you want to give it a specific request and then tell it as much as possible about how you want this request to be completed. Going back to this metaphor of chatbot is like an intern, the more specific you can be, the more structured you can be in what you're asking, the more the output is able to match what you need. And then we have some risks. Data privacy, I'm sure, is something you're familiar with, especially if you're using a free chatbot. I would assume that anything you're putting into it is going to go into its training data set. In other words, it will be trained on it. This means that if you put in confidential information and someone asks about this confidential information in future, there is a slim chance, but I think a real chance, that the chatbot just regurgitates that information. You can mitigate this by paying for a chatbot, which gives you a privacy mode, which ChatGPT does, for example. But if you are using the free versions, I wouldn't put in anything which is not open information or openly accessible. We talked about incorrect answers, so always check what you rely on. Bias is a potential concern. So chatbots are trained on open data from the internet. So any biases which are there in their source documentation are likely to also be there in the chatbots, despite the efforts of the AI companies to remove it. And another risk is around transparency. And I think the biggest problems I've seen in this field so far have been when people have submitted something using a chatbot, but not admitted that they've done so. It has quite a distinctive writing style, so it is sometimes quite obvious when you're using a chatbot. So I think it's better to avoid any sense of deception by being upfront about the role that AI plays in your work. I should say, if you have questions about any of these, please put it in the Q&A, and then we'll get to that later in the webinar. Good. Yeah. Okay. So the remainder of the next, probably 45 minutes of this webinar, we are going to look at 4 different ways that AI can help your monitoring and evaluation practice. So there's 6 ways that I've identified, and I'll be very interested to hear from you if there are any other ways which you find useful. Please put it in the chat or Q&A. But the 6 ways which I've picked out, which we're going to go through, are firstly, measurement design. Chatbots can design your results framework, setting your indicators, and develop methods for you. Secondly is questionnaire design. Whether you're doing quantitative research, qualitative research, a focus group discussion, or a structured questionnaire, a chatbot should be able to deliver a decent first draft of a questionnaire that you want to use. Thirdly is actually conducting research. Chatbots can't yet converse very well in text. There is an option on ChatGPT to speak to it in voice, but whenever I do that, it thinks I'm Welsh for some reason and tries to speak to me in Welsh. So that side of the technology does not seem wildly well developed. But if you're doing text-based research, in other words, like an interview viewed via a text-based interface, then ChatGPT can conduct the interviews for you, or a AI software can do that. Next is data analysis. So you can use it for quantitative and qualitative analysis, and we'll hopefully look at both. Writing and editing. This is probably the major thing people said they're using it for, actually. So if I find a few examples, some people said it was good for paraphrasing, for structuring presentations, for writing, proposal writing. So that's a really helpful thing for our MEL work. And finally, guidance and advice. So providing a thinking partner, someone to ask questions to, give ideas, bounce ideas off, is a really helpful part of AI. So yeah, we now have a poll. Of these 6, we're going to look at 3 in depth, and we're going to look at 3 of them in a bit more casually, a bit more quickly. So can you, Ella, please trigger the poll, and everybody think about these 3 and select 3 options which you are most interested in. And then we'll see majority vote. We'll pick those 3 and use those in the rest of the webinar. Good, results are coming in, and I'm relieved to see that you broadly follow what I was thinking. Great. Okay, so can we end the poll, Ella? Share results, thank you. So for clear winners, congratulations to measurement design and congratulations to data analysis. I think the 2 runner-ups is probably questionnaire design. So we'll look at measurement design, questionnaire design, and data analysis in depth. Conducting research, writing and editing, and guidance and advice, we will skip over, but we won't spend as much time on it. Good. In which case, in fact, I should probably write this down because I'm going to forget it in a few seconds. Okay, so I saw I think almost 85% of you have actually used these chatbots before, so hopefully you'll be familiar with this. But for those who haven't used it before, I just wanted to give a very quick overview of what you should be doing. I'm going to ask you to practice using these chatbots and asking them questions and getting information out of them and trying to make this information as good as possible. So when I ask you to do this, you'll need to sign in to a chatbot online. You should have had a bit of instruction on this from the email that the DCED sent out. You can pick whatever chatbot you want, but a common one is OpenAI. So if you just click on the link, you'll then need to sign up. It will be free, but you might need to use your Google account or Microsoft account or register with a username and password. So then you'll have access to the chatbot itself. When you're there, you'll see a tick box which you can use to enter text. And we call this the prompt. This is the starting text that you enter into the model. So the box will look something like this. How can I help you today? And it will have a place for you to message. And you can type in whatever you want. In this case, hello, could you please help me with MEL? You click the little send button, which is over on the right, and then the chatbot will give its response. An important reminder is that a chatbot is not a calculator. It's not something where you give it an input, a calculation, and just take the output. Instead, treat it more like a person or a colleague in that you want to talk back to it to ask for clarifications or ask it to change or modify its answer to improve it. And the more you do so, the better the responses will be. Great, so let's get going. And the first section we're going to look at is measurement plans. So I am going to give you a quick case study of a program. This program is from MDF Pakistan, in fact, where Muneeb used to work, right? So you should know this well. You'll see the link to the case study I used in the bottom right, but I should emphasize that apart from the case study, everything you'll see here, I made up or asked ChatGPT to make it up. So don't take any of this as a reflection on the real work of MDF Pakistan. It's just a case study for us to experiment with. So here is a description of the program. We're also going to post a link to a document which has the text in it, so you can copy and paste it. Then go to your chatbot and try to ask it to develop a measurement plan. And try to experiment with different prompts, different follow-up conversations, and so on, in order to get the measurement plan as good as you can. Okay, so that's the first task. You've got 5 minutes. Muneeb, do you think you could post the link to the document? Yeah. So if you click that, you should go to this page. Can you still see my screen, Nabanita or Muneeb? Oh, can you see the document on here? Yeah. So you'll see here, there's the instructions for the first thing. You'll be able to copy the summary of the program from here and go to your chatbot and try and get a measurement plan. You have 5 minutes to get it as good as you can be.
Adam, maybe can you repeat the instructions again? Because I think the link is there. It's more Aleph is asking for the instructions.
Yeah, so you'll see the link which is on the screen. This will take you just to the text. When you're there, you can copy the summary of the program, go to whatever chatbot you were using, and ask it to develop an MEL plan. For instance, you could write develop an MEL plan for copy in the text. Not very well formatted, but it's okay. And then ChatGPT will start producing an MEL plan for you. It will just take you a few seconds to do that. And it's okay to use Microsoft Copilot if that's better for you. But try and modify your prompt. Try asking it in different ways, different things, in order to get it as good a response as you can. Good. We've got another 2 minutes. So if you've finished, try modifying the prompt, see if you can improve your result. Good. Thanks, Aleph, for posting your prompt. Okay. Great. So I hope you found it useful. It's nice to see people saying that they found a useful framework or it generated good work. If you have any thoughts on it, please put it in the chat box. And I think what hopefully you found is that if you just paste a basic prompt, develop an MEL plan for this project, it's really simple, and it will actually get you quite a good result. So I was thinking about it, but it hopefully defined objectives. It will probably have interesting. It will probably have given you indicators and some measurement methods. But you will get a better result if you are more specific in your prompt and you are more clear about what you want. So Valon actually gives a really good example. You can ask it not just to adhere to any MEL framework, but you can ask it to give something which is compliant with DCED Standard. Rue says you can ask it to focus on efficiency and efficacy indicators. So all of this, it's kind of going back to this idea of ChatGPT as an intern. It's giving much more structure and much more focus to what it does. So it produces something which is exactly what you want. So here is what I asked, and I'm just going to post it so ChatGPT can get through, discuss and stuff. So I'm not going to do it. Yeah, there we go. So this is an example of a prompt which I would use for this kind of thing. So you start off, remember, by telling it who it is. You're an expert in MEL for private sector development, and then you go on to say what you want it to do. And then I give quite a specific instructions for how I want to produce the MEL framework. So I say it should be a table, it should have columns which say what the level is, the change step, the indicator, the measurement method, and so on. And all of this is about trying to make sure that it produces not just a generic MEL framework, but a specific one which aligns with the need of a program meeting the DCED standard. So you'll see here that it outputs the results measurement framework in the kind of structure you would want. You have your indicators, you have your measurement method, your sample, and so on. Sorry, Dick can't read it. I'll try and zoom in. Hopefully that's better. One good thing about it is that you can then go back and forth and ask for a more or less, you know, you can ask for it to be changed. So you might say, thank you. I work on a small program which does not have many. So you can ask for it to, for example, change the measurement plan to make it more suitable for a program with fewer resources, or you could go the other way and say, this isn't robust enough, I want a more robust measurement plan. And in either case, ChatGPT will do its best to adjust what it does. For example, here the measurement method is self-reporting by local entrepreneurs, and you're sampling just 3 participating businesses. In the original one, you got production records from all participating businesses. So it does quite a good job of trying to tailor it in response to what you're asking. And because it's a conversation, it's relatively easy to go back and forth and get a version which works for you. Okay, let's stop. No, it stopped itself. Great. And there's a picture of a cow eating silage, just to, you know, make sure it's not just text on the screens. Let's go on to questionnaire design. And we are going to do exactly the same exercise. And here I want you to think about the prompt which I showed last time, the way it set up what ChatGPT, who it was, and the kind of answers you wanted. It doesn't matter if you're using the free version, the answers won't be quite as high quality, but you should still be able to get, you know, a decent answer. So you'll be able to try it out, definitely. So the next exercise, and I'm going to give another 5, maybe 4 minutes for it. I'll check in after 3 or 4 minutes and see how people are doing, is to design a questionnaire for the following indicators. Again, I give the context and I give the indicators that you want to use to measure the project. And Muneeb, could you post again in the chat the document with, yeah, thank you. So if you go back to the PDF, go onto page 2, you'll see all this text, so you can copy and paste it to design a questionnaire for the following indicators. Cool. So you've got 4 minutes or so to play around. Good. It looks like some people have finished, so I'll just wait another minute and then we'll move on. So you've got 1 more minute to kind of experiment with it. Great. Okay, so it sounds like there's been quite a few good examples. I really liked, I think, Alev's example to amend the prompt to make it more quantitative in nature. So if you prefer it to be more quantitative or more qualitative, you can specify that. And Mariam also simplified the language for people with limited language skills. And it's very good. It is really a language machine. So it's really good at making it more complicated or less complicated, also for looking in other languages apart from English. Great. So the prompt I would use for it is this one, and I'll put it into ChatGPT so we can, yes, this page. Let's hope it works. Good. So while it's generating, I'll just give you the prompt I used, which is to, again, introduce who it is, what it's doing. And then I gave it quite a strong structure to follow. Start with an introduction, have a questionnaire in 3 sections, general feedback, data on livestock, and data on women's participation. And then give it as a table with 3 columns: the question number, the type of question, the options for the question. So this is like how I like to develop questionnaires. And by taking a second to think about how I want the output and giving it to ChatGPT, I make sure that when it comes back, it is what I need. So you'll see here, it is, yeah. Did it mostly do? Oh yeah, it's got a bit confused about exactly what I wanted, but it worked when I did it in training. But it's got the questions like, what is the total quantity of silage you produced? Report the average monthly yield before and after the intervention, and what has been the change in your household income. So if, for example, I looked at it and I was like, well, section 2's a bit kind of, it doesn't really have enough in. So I could say section 2 doesn't, you know what, I think you should start off by being positive. My style as a manager. So I say, that's good. However, so I can go back and highlight issues with the questionnaire and ask it to address it. And that will give me a ideally better output at the end of it. Good. We're going to keep on going. The next one wasn't one of our prioritized topics, but was, oh, it was actually. We've done questionnaire design, and now we need to do data analysis. Okay, so this is the third of our prioritized topics. So we're going to look at this, and I'm going to ask you to, again, try data analysis out, but this is the last time you'll have a chance to play around with ChatGPT in this session. After that, we'll go to a more standard webinar format for another like 20 minutes or so, and then we'll have half an hour to address your questions. So this is a qualitative data analysis exercise. So the data is in response to the question, how has this intervention affected the livelihood of you and your family? It's the same intervention as before, but remember that this is not real intervention data, this is imaginary data. So don't take this as a reflection of the intervention's performance. So Muneeb, could you please, thank you, post the link. Go to the link, go to page 3, and on page 3, I think you should find, yeah, On page 3, you'll find the answers to, you'll find the kind of responses here. Get your chatbot to do some qualitative data analysis of it. And when you've finished, please post the prompt that you found most effective in the chat. And since this is the 3rd time, I think I'll give like 3 minutes for this exercise. So you've got a bit less time, so go. Good. 3 minutes are up. Do you want some more time, or should we move on? Just type in the chat box if you've completed the exercise or if you need more time. Completed. Brilliant. Okay, so it looks like everyone kind of managed the exercise okay. So if we go back to in ChatGPT 4, so I'm just going to paste my prompt and I'll talk through it. So I think this is probably quite familiar to you now. So it starts with the same kind of given the context, saying who it is. And then the instructions which I gave here were to read the responses carefully, develop a list of themes, sub-themes, and put them in a table in standard format rather than haiku format. So I quite like M. Peterson's response. So I tell it what columns I want the table, and I get it to say what the theme is, sub-theme, an illustrative quote, and the numbers of the responses. When I practiced this webinar actually with my team, I did get some caution that they'd used it for qualitative research and found that the data wasn't always right. It didn't always pick up on all the qualitative findings, and sometimes it got the numbers wrong. So you do need to, as Ron said, you do need to check its work. but here's what it would look like. So there's a theme of like impact on financial stability. We've got increased income, improved standard of living, financial struggles. And you can see how much easier this makes qualitative analysis because you have like a starting point. It's not the full report, but this is a brilliant way to save time in the early phases of analysis when you're looking at a ton of qualitative data and asking what you should do. So ChatGPT can also do quantitative analysis. You can't do this on the free plan. So this is one important difference between the free plan and the paid for plan. And I think you can't do it on other chatbots, but I might be wrong. But I wanted to show an example here. I've generated a set of like imaginary data from this intervention. And I ask it what changes have taken place before and after the intervention. And I'm asking it to write a short summary and a conclusion. So this will take a bit of time because the data analysis aspect of it is quite time consuming. Like it takes a few seconds to actually do the data analysis. But I think it's worth looking at because it is quite impressive. And the way it actually works is that ChatGPT writes code in order to do the task you have done it. So it writes a little Python script or something like that. It runs the Python script, and then the Python script generates the results of averages, of generating charts, whatever you want. And I've used this a few times, and I found it mostly as right. But this is an area where you particularly have to be careful to check its work. Rory, do you want to add anything on this function? Have you used its quantitative analysis function?
I have to an extent. The quantitative side of things was slower in being developed on the platform. If you think you need to check like responses that are text-based, definitely stuff with numbers, you need to triple check.
Double check.
It's not as refined in terms of how it deals with numbers as it is with dealing with text. So just to flag that.
Yeah, that's really true. And there's a good example here. It's got the annual income comparison right, that the income went down, but in its conclusion, it says there's a notable increase in average income. So it got that wrong. If I ask it to like, are you sure about average income increasing? If I ask it to check, then it will hopefully rerun the numbers and work out that it was wrong. The other thing which it just doesn't do as well as like a research analyst might, the income increase is driven by a couple of outliers. If you ask it to check for outliers, it will go and do so, but it doesn't take initiative to check for outliers in the same way a human researcher might. And as Aleph says, this is a paid ChatGPT version. You can do the qualitative analysis through the free version, but not the quantitative analysis.
Just a flag there that if you do have the paid version, and you seem to be doing this yourself there, Adam, you have your own GPTs there. Like you have your own. Is that correct with these data analysis and report AI? Have you built out your own? Yeah, exactly. Your own little mini GPTs, and then you can give in custom instructions. So if you know you're going to be doing a lot of quantitative analytics, you can ask it. You can put in, in the background, so to speak, in the settings. You can ask it, hey, listen, can you always check for outliers, or things like this? If it's something that is problematic on an ongoing basis, you can try to address it that way.
Yeah. Good, thanks for that. And we'll actually try using another one in a second. So, okay, we've got 3 more topics to cover. I want to quickly go through them in 10 minutes, and then we'll have time to go back to any questions. The first one is using ChatGPT for conducting research. And unlike the others, this is something which you can't really do kind of yourself, because although ChatGPT can conduct research, you can give it this prompt, you're not able to access the recent, like the conversations it's had with other people. So you need some kind of custom solution. There are a few out there. Fortel and Qualia Interviews are two that I'm aware of, but I guess there's more. And Rory, I think you work for Fortel, or you're a partner with them. Do you want to quickly talk us through what it does as a research solution?
Yeah, I mean, Fortel in particular is a qualitative impact data generation tool. They use avatars to conduct interviews. So you set out a survey that will generate data that is relevant for the topics that you want to address. You feed that into the system, and avatars actually conduct the interviews. In areas of high connectivity, that's done over like WhatsApp links or emails. In low connectivity, you'll be doing that using an offline version. And the avatars, as I say, conduct the interview. Those interviews are then transcribed, if necessary, translated. And there's an AI backend that has been built out around sentiment analysis, that then crunches all of the transcripts in order to generate those quantitative, but particularly the qualitative insights from the data.
Good. Thank you very much. So a lot of these tools are quite new, and they've really like exploded in the last year. Personally, I don't have a huge amount of experience of using it, but I definitely encourage people to experiment. And if you have like tools that you found helpful, I'm sure that Nabanita and the DCED would be really interested to hear about it and learn from it. So we also talked about writing and editing. This is possibly like the most immediate benefit, which certainly within my team, ChatGPT has had. I'm not going to ask you to do it, but you can use ChatGPT as an editor relatively easily. And to build on what Rory said here, I'm using a particular like tailored version of a ChatGPT called Edit GPT, which is like built specifically for proofreading. So if I ask it to proofread and correct some text with mistakes in it, then it should do it. And there are a number of different types of prompts you can use. I like it to tell it to keep my style and keep the text clear and professional, but there are lots of ways you could try to get it to change the text, to add more, to adjust the flow, depending on what you're trying to achieve. So yeah, this works really well. I think it also works very well for like adjusting sentiment. If you're sending like a difficult professional email, you want to make sure that you're being polite or you're being forceful enough, ChatGPT is very good at adjusting your text in that way. You can also use it for writing reports directly. You are not going to be able to generate a whole report on it. I think it just doesn't understand enough about it. But if you give it specific bullet points to say, here are the points I'm trying to make, it's able to build up text around it. So that's really helpful. And then finally, you can just use it for guidance and advice. So if you are struggling with attribution, measuring job creation, really anything that you're having difficulty with in your programs, you can go to the chatbot. You could give it a prompt kind of like this one, saying who it is, telling it the type of advice that it would be giving, and reinforcing that you want it to be using the DCED standard, and have a conversation with it and see if it's helpful. Bear in mind, it will not always be right, so don't take its answers as gospel, but do think through, use it as a way to think through the problems you're facing. Which pretty much takes us to the end of the questions that we have, of the kind of different methods that we have. There are lots of other ways to use AI, so I'll be very interested from hearing from you on how you're using it, apart from the ways I've depicted here. I should also say that if you encounter a problem that a chatbot can't solve, we are running a training course on monitoring and evaluation and another training course on market systems development. And our courses take place online in May. So really coming up in, I think, about 3 weeks' time. We've got a couple of places available. So if you're interested in training in May, if you go to the website, you're still able to register. And that takes me to the end of the presentation. Thank you very much for joining. We've got time for Q&A. So Nabanita, maybe I can hand over to you to facilitate that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Adam, for that really interesting presentation. And thank you, Rory, also for taking in a lot of the questions as they come in. So please keep on asking your questions and we will take them on. So I'll start with the ones which are open. Adam, maybe this is specifically for you. There's a question from David Tilong on how did you prepare the spreadsheet to ask AI for data analysis?
Yeah, I don't think you need to prepare the spreadsheet in any particular way. You just need to make sure that the column headings are clear. So if that means that the AI will know what the column headings are. Sometimes it will be exported from your survey software with codes. So if the column heading is like 2.1, 2.2, the AI system is not going to know what 2.1 and 2.2 mean. But in that sense, it's no different to a human research assistant. So I don't think there's any other particular way that it needs to be prepared, which is different. Rory, what would you say on that?
I would say I zoned out for a second and I missed what you were talking about. I was reading the questions in the Q&A section. Sorry, man.
Sure. How do you prepare the spreadsheet to ask for data analysis? To ask AI?
Yeah,
I said no different. So
that's right. Exactly. No, I'd heard the start of your answer and I was like, he's on the right track. That's more. There is no specific formatting in terms of what the Excel. What you put into the Excel, but again, coming back to what we were talking about maybe over the session is the accuracy of the prompts, right? So the more accurate you are in terms of defining exactly what it is that you want the bot to deal with, the more accurate the answers you're going to be. And in Excel, then you can maybe use row or column numbers or letters. You know, they're good at that. If you start talking about titles of columns, sometimes they get mixed up again. So the more specific you can be, again, the more accurate the answers are going to be.
Great. The next question is something which had also come up before. So I think like any tips on validity and reliability would be good. So, you know, if you ask them, for example, to create a measurement plan or some other thing, how can you rely on the validity and reliability of information? Do you have any tips on that? So I'll throw that again, both to Rory and Adam.
You want to take it first, Rory?
Yeah, I mean, it's always the same. Like the bot is an aid, right? It's a help. It is not a replacement. And Adam made this point really well at the beginning. The bot, they're generalists, you know. So in terms of being able to help you get a first draft out, to be able to structure your thoughts, fantastic. To be able to generate a fully fledged plan with all the bells and whistles, with all fully relevant and valid data, not going to happen, or at least not anytime soon, right? So you really got to go back, check through it, cross-check with colleagues, etc., right? And do that kind of sanity check, I would say.
Yep. So I think that's entirely right. And I think it does help to understand what it can do and what it's not good at. And as you use it, you'll get familiar with this over time. And I think two things to be aware of is that anything with specific data points, you need to be really careful. As Rory said, it's not great at quantitative like number crunching. You saw that in an error it made on one of the questions I asked it. So anything where it is like pulling very specific data points, it is producing references, that kind of thing, I would be careful. And also be careful for anything where it needs a lot of context. So I think it can produce like a good measurement plan. But if you want it to produce a good measurement plan of the sort that FCDO or SDC like to use, that's probably like too much context in there for it really to understand what is FCDO's perspective on measurement plans.
Great. Thank you for that. Then we have a question from Fazal on, do you have any recommendations of like good websites to learn about Merrill? And well, this is specifically to Merrill, so not only related to AI. So I guess I can maybe also like point you, Fazal, towards, again, depends on what you're looking for. There's a ton of resources available on the DCED website on good monitoring practices. So if you go on the DCED website, if you go onto the standard page, there is the implementation guidelines where there's a lot of guidances as well as case studies on the standard. So I don't know whether you're looking specifically for AI related guidance, but like for general MEL, you will find a lot of information. Is there any specific related to AI that Rory or Adam, you want to point towards also?
Not sure, can't think of an AI specific one, but while obviously my favorite website is the DCED Standard website.
No, not really AI specific in the sense of AI and Merle.
Right. Then taking in the question from Marianne, and she has repeated it. Adam, can you tell us more about like how you made ChatGPT conversant with the DCED standard? Did you need to upload anything, or did you just find everything from the website?
It's already on there. So because it has like, they train it on all the data they can find, it has been trained on the DCED standards materials. So if you prompt it in the right way, it will already be familiar with the DCED standard, at least at a basic level. In what you saw, I didn't do anything to make it particularly conversant.
Right. There's another question from Fazal and Blakika on, are there options to make ChatGPT visualize the data or like to connect it to Power BI maybe? Is that something you guys have any experience on?
There are other providers that are building out GPTs on the ChatGPT platform. And if you have the paid version, you can choose, there's like a search function, and you can give in the types of stuff you're looking for. So graphs, for example, right? And there will be different providers that are building out AI compatible tools to generate graphs or mind maps or whatever you're looking for in a kind of an automated manner. It's usually, it links to an outside platform and then links the answer back into the chat, right? So that's generally how it works. You get mixed results. For basic kind of stuff, it can work well. But again, once you're hitting a certain threshold in terms of your own expectations, it'll max out, like it'll hit its limits.
Okay. Thanks for that, Rory. Before we go on to take the next question, can I ask Ella to also share the next poll? So this is a new format that we're testing out at the DCED, and we want to organize similar training workshops for people. If you find it interesting, and I see people are signing off already, so we have 1.5 hours booked for this. So if you could please also like give us some feedback on how you found this session and other topics that you might be interested in, it would really help us to design more products such as this. And as Adam had already hinted at, I am talking and trying to nail down Rory for another workshop on the same topic. So we will be working on that. So any feedback on things you want to learn about would be really helpful for us to provide material that's useful for you. Okay, while you answer that, let's maybe move on to the next question. Moore has a question on, is it possible to have the detailed ChatGPT user manual in French and English? Do we have a manual for that? Again,
yeah, basically there is no user manual that I know of. So there are a lot of websites, Facebook groups, and so on, which have information on ChatGPT. I'll post a link to one blog, which I find quite helpful. And I think you might have some kind of like how to use it page. I'll see if I can find it. But yeah, Rory, do you have anything?
No, but as you mentioned earlier, the ChatGPT bot itself is pretty good at translations. So you can a lot of the time put what you need in there and ask it for it in French, and it'll get it back to you.
Great. Then there is a question from Abid on ChatGPT reproducing the survey questionnaire in R Markdown code format. Sorry, this is very technical for me. So I'll ask Adam or Rory to take this. How capable are these generative AI tools in performing tasks like this?
They're pretty good. When you're starting to get into kind of coding and stuff like that, these are very, very standardized processes with a lot of high quality training data available. So in terms of something like that, from a technical perspective of getting it into a form that is usable in a specific tool, if you know the form that is supposed to be in, or the code, or you know, language that it's supposed to be in, then it does a pretty good job, actually. That's not to say that the content is going to be perfect, but the form will be good. That's just to clarify that.
All right. Then moving on to the next question. I really like this, Carola, because I had a similar question. Is the accuracy of prompts related to a person's experience, or do you think anyone could ask a good question?
I think anyone can, like, I think prompts is kind of like, as you say, it's like asking a question, or it's like managing someone. Anyone, like, it's a skill, but it's not a skill which is unique for certain skill sets or anything like that. So you just need to think carefully through what are you asking and what information is needed in order to produce the thing that you want, but anyone can do it. You can also use ChatGPT to improve your prompts. So we talked a bit about GPTs earlier, which are like tailored types of like ChatGPT, which are designed for specific tasks. You get some GPTs which are designed for prompt editing, or you could say to ChatGPT, here is the prompt I'm thinking of. Could you please adjust it to make it better? And so you can get help on prompting that way.
And just to flag what Adam had actually been talking about earlier, like the structure that Adam laid out was really good. Like give it a role, right? A function, specific objectives. So you know, there's a formula to follow basically in terms of structuring the prompts, and you'll get pretty high quality results. And then it's experience, right? It's like interviewing, or you know, there's other things where yes, there's a process, yes, there is, you know, kind of a manual or steps or whatever, and then there's experience, right? And you know, there's a bit of a mix of that, but you can already get to kind of 80% quality with like 10% of input, I would say.
Great. Then I think we have answered all the questions that they have as they have come up. No open questions. Another final maybe question. Any feedback on the quality of response between ChatGPT versus Microsoft Copilot? I think somebody else also had asked this before on like whether, are there like differences between the quality?
So for these two, ChatGPT and Microsoft Copilot have the same like underlying model, which is GPT-4. So they should be pretty similar. ChatGPT has like a few more features. I don't think Copilot can do like quantitative data analysis, for example. And Microsoft Copilot, if you have Windows, is free. So that is a big advantage. Or I think you get the more advanced model under the free version. There are other systems like Gemini from Google or Claude from Anthropic. And I think for most use cases, the basic answer is they're all kind of the same. If there are like, if you're getting really advanced and like, you know, building your own models and stuff, I think they probably have differences. But for the average user, I don't think you will notice a huge difference between them. But Rory, you might actually be best placed to answer that.
No, I mean, I wouldn't have much to add. It's there might be some differences. I haven't come across huge differences yet. The standard seems to be pretty standard for most of what you're going to be doing.
Great. Okay, we have more questions coming in. We have a question from Gad on can ChatGPT carry out quantitative data cleaning and analysis? So again, more, I know you've already mentioned, Adam and Rory, that it's not that great yet, but do you want to say some more on this?
Yeah, you can definitely use it for that. If you're doing data cleaning, I would try and be quite specific about like, how do you want it to clean the data? Are you looking for outliers? Are you looking, it might be, I don't know if it would find like you're looking for inconsistencies. There's a lot of context to data cleaning because you're trying to look for things that like don't make sense given what you know of the context. For example, you know, a farmer who has 300 hectares, you might be able to say that's not realistic, but ChatGPT might not have that context. So yeah, try it out, experiment. For myself, I wouldn't use it for that because I think I can just, I don't think it would save me time. But if you're not very confident with like quantitative data analysis software, it might be a good start.
Can I add one thing on this one? What I've found useful in my work, like especially if I'm doing data cleaning on Excel, for example, which is most widely used, sometimes it's a matter of just getting like specific tasks, like for example, not knowing the exact formula to extract information. So if you have a column with a mix of like, words and numbers, and you just want to pull out the numbers, and sometimes you just don't know the formula. So sometimes you can just ask ChatGPT to say like, this is the column in which I have like a mix of words and numbers, and I want to pull this out. And sometimes it gives you that specific formula before you can get to data cleaning. So I think those specific things within data cleaning, you can still rely on ChatGPT to help you in.
Right.
That's a really great point, though. In terms of using ChatGPT for kind of quantitative type stuff, a lot of the time it's actually smarter to ask it to generate these formulas for Excel than asking it to do actual calculations itself, right? So the generation of this formula is, again, this kind of coding type principle, and there it's pretty strong. Whereas when you ask it to actually do like number crunching itself, I wouldn't rely on it. Let's put it like that. Yeah.
Right. We have a question on whether whether any of you have used or heard about Coloop, which has got some useful feedback. Adam, Rory, Muneeb.
I haven't come across it, but I'm checking it out in the background.
Yeah, thanks for bringing it to the radar. We have a question from Vibe on, in the future, what malpractices do you think will have the highest potential to be normally done with the structural help of AI? That's a great question.
Yeah, that's a big, slightly more conceptual question. What do I think? I think we will probably move to a situation where a lot of like data analysis is done through AI. Because although I think eventually it will get very good at quantitative data analysis, it's already very good at qualitative data analysis. And I think humans will be there like kind of guiding the process rather than conducting it. My guess is that trying to say what the research is for, how does it fit with the objectives of the organization, and stuff like setting results chains, kind of laying out, theories of change. I think will stay human, but it's very difficult to tell. Rory, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean that is a big one. I think like what I'm working on this specifically for is to get to the point of real-time impact data. Okay, so in terms of having kind of interfaces with like CRM systems, so databases of contacts and people, and just doing micro sampling on an ongoing basis. With real-time analytics of the input coming in from people, and that dashboarded, right? So you can tell in real time if something is going off track, for example, right? And that's where I think we're going to be able to really push the boundaries. I think in terms of exactly what Adam was talking about, identifying what it is that we want to optimize for, right? What it is we actually want to achieve, and formulating that, and the process of coming to that kind of consensus. That's something that AI will not be able to take over. But I think in terms of managing processes and data generation and visualization, stuff like that, I think it's going to come a long way and really enable people to access larger volumes of data quicker. And I think that's going to be really necessary as the rate of eco-social change accelerates due to climate change. So I think it's a possibility there.
Right.
It relates also to the next question from Mohammed. At the moment, an AI can give you a very generic theory of change. So if you give a project, it will give kind of a standard theory of change, which is like the same for every project. That might be better than some of the theories of change which are actually like used in programs, but it won't be as good as a program which really thinks about its theory of change and really considers its like, what's unique about it, what's unique about the context, how does it need to work differently to other programs. So
right. The next questions
Can I take the next one?
Yeah, please. Yeah. The next two I think are also again specifically related to use, whether you can use AI tools to transcribe audio interviews correctly and also use it for proposal appraisal. So yes, please go ahead.
I'd love to take the next one, and then we can maybe alternate there, Adam, because the one around language is a huge one for me at the moment. So all of these AIs use what are referred to as LLMs, so large language models. And there's the term that gets used is well-resourced or poorly resourced, or just non-existent, right? So you can imagine that English has a ginormous number of LLMs, large language models that are available, and they're very, very refined, okay? You start going down through the languages, I don't know, Spanish, French, Arabic, Mandarin, Japanese, right? These are going to be still well resourced, and the capacity for these then transcribe interviews and stuff is going to be good. It's going to be strong, right? There's going to be relatively few mistakes, etc. As you start going down along the list of resourced languages, it gets worse and worse, right? And this is a huge issue because this is representative of the AI gap generally. So who is it gets access to these tools? Who is it that can actually gain benefit from AI and the increased productivity that it can bring? Okay. And what we're seeing is again the manifestation of the digital divide in a new form. But if you ask me, it's even more exacerbated because the potential of AI is even higher, right? So this is a huge issue, and the building out of local language LLMs is something that I think really needs to be addressed ASAP. The GIZ have a program called Fair Forward. They're kind of looking at this, but there's not a huge amount of movement. And there's a couple of other actors out there, but really, great question. I'm glad somebody flagged it because it's a big deal. So, Adam, save me.
No, I completely agree. I read an interesting example of a small kind of like language where they got an LLM working using translation from a Bible, like using a Bible, which was one of the few texts which had been translated into that language from English, and then that like allowed. But I think there's a lot more research to be done and like operationalization of it.
Adam, do you want to take the next question about using AI for proposal appraisal? I know we have spoken in length about that.
Yeah. So definitely it can, with all of the caveats we have already raised. Number one, don't rely on it entirely. Number two, give it structure. So if you are appraising proposals, don't just ask the AI to say if they're good or bad, say what are our criteria for rating it? What is the different scales of 1 to 5 on these 5 metrics? What are you trying to achieve from it? If you give it that context, I think an AI could do a good job as part of a team of proposal appraising. You would also want it, I would say, to firstly give you its score, and secondly to explain why it gave the score, so you can try to justify the reasoning.
Right. There was also a question from Dick Tinsley in the chat because he had some follow-up to the question. May I ask Ella to maybe unmute him because that might help to elaborate your question a bit more specifically.
Just remind me who this is you're talking about.
This is Dick Tinsley.
Great, he should now be able to talk.
Hi, Dick. Do you want to unmute yourself, please, and
Okay,
explain
I
your
think I'm
question?
unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
What question are you thinking of here?
Where you just added a comment where you said you had a commentary in question 5 where you ran out of space.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
That's a rather complicated issue, but I think you're in the question 5. I think most of your information is coming out of scanning the internet. If something has been overlooked,
Mhm.
will it pick it up? And my concern for smallholder farmers is that nobody is looking at operational feasibility. That is, who is looking at labor, availability of labor, compromises farmers have to make when that labor is not available. And following that is my super concern, where we are compelling farmers to exert about twice as much energy as they actually have access to. That's a very serious problem. It's not been picked up in any of the development efforts. Because if it was, we stop dictating what farmers should do and start figuring out how to get access to quality mechanization that'll allow them to do it. I'm sorry, this is a little bit off the subject of AI, but it's something that for AI to be valid, it needs to be looked at. Am I making sense there?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think you
I
are.
mean-
Yeah.
Oh.
Sorry, Rory, go ahead, please. Yeah.
Sorry, Nabanita. I was going to say that this touches on the topic of bias, right? So the bots have been trained on data that's available, right? And if data isn't available, and they won't be trained on it, right? And then it reproduces these. On the one side, it reproduces just gaps in knowledge, and more, I don't know which adjective to use. It's probably more problematic that it just reproduces the worldviews of those that have been providing most input onto the internet, basically, right? Which is not representative of the actual populace of the planet, right? And that would definitely include smallholder farmers in the majority of the world, right? So they're lacking representation online. Therefore, the bots that have been trained using publicly available data are also reproducing these biases, basically. So it's definitely
So it's reinforced.
Right.
It's reinforcing, exactly.
It's reinforcing what's already established and limiting the potential for innovations into something more effective.
I don't know if it's limiting the potential. I think the humans using it are the ones that limit their own capacity to innovate, right? If you're aware of that bias and the limitations of the tool that you're using, you can still circumvent those limitations, adjust for the biases, and use it for really rapid innovative processes. The issue is that most people don't like to think about their biases, and it's a lot of work to self-reflect and stuff like that, man. I mean, I got stuff to do, so that's the issue, I think, more than the tech itself.
Right.
Okay, well, thank you very much for.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Dick. I'm just going to move on because we have 2 more questions. Just looking at the time, I would really like to respond to also those. What are your views on data safety and ChatGPT? Any guidelines for that? And I know you've touched a bit upon that, but maybe it's useful still to run on some.
Yeah, we talked about it a bit at the beginning. So I would
Yeah.
say assume that anything which is you type into a free model is going to be used for their training. This doesn't mean that it's going to go around shouting about what you say, but I think it's at least plausibly the case that it goes into the training set. And if someone asks about what you're talking about in future, then it will come up. And I don't think that's like good practice if it's like really confidential information. So for confidential information or, you know, responses from research, that kind of thing, I think you should be using a paid for version, which gives you the opportunity. I can actually show you quickly if it's helpful. If I go to my settings, I can turn on data controls, and there used to be a privacy mode, which now I can't see. So I'm looking in the same place, so they've removed it. Oh no, here it is. So now it's in like and stuff, so I would remotely confidential.
I think what I would probably add to that is that there are entities, sometimes companies, sometimes kind of NGOs that are making GPTs like off the shelf. They're making them available to communities, right? Who want to build out expertise and a shared knowledge base, right, around specific topics, or, you know, along specific methodological lines or whatever. And those will be private, right? So a lot of that is built around this idea that we need to avoid sharing all of this data, much of which is quite private and sensitive, just on the internet, right? And with open bots. So the idea of kind of you know, closed communities, so to speak, networks, that come together to build out GPTs on a specific topic or approach, that's there, you know, that's a possibility. It's not as well established in people's heads as the kind of publicly available versions of OpenAI's tools and whatnot, but there are options.
Great. Okay, then we have the final question on like, how does AI bots overcome the issue of plagiarism? Is that something you have something to say about?
I can jump in again. In some universities now, they're allowing you to actually use, you know, like to say ChatGPT generated this piece of knowledge, right? So in terms of plagiarism in that sense, or the use of ChatGPT in academic settings, that's coming in. You can ask ChatGPT to list out whatever references it may have drawn upon. Sometimes it might miss something, but it generally gives a bit of an effort at it. And yeah, I mean, again, there's this topic of whose ultimate responsibility is it, the tools or the person using the tool, right? So if you're not being careful about referencing properly, you know, and being plagiaristic, then yeah, you may just end up doing it, right? I mean, that's your own responsibility, if you ask me. Like, you can't blame ChatGPT for that.
Yep. And my suggestion would be to be transparent about how you're using it, and that I think that way you help to avoid accusations of plagiarism or kind of misrepresentation.
Great point. Okay, with that, we've come to the end of the Q&As. Somebody also had a question on whether we can provide the response to the answers to the questions while we share the recording. Yes, we will do that. And we are exactly at, well, almost like 2 minutes left. So thank you everyone for your participation, and special thanks to Adam and Rory for like this, for sharing all this knowledge and insights. We really appreciate it. And thanks also to Muneeb and Ella for being the quiet forces organizing all of this. Thank you so much, everyone.
Good. Thanks a lot, and thanks a lot for organizing it, Nabanita. And there are lots more webinars coming out of the DCED, so you can find that on their website, or I can paste it in a link now. Thanks for joining, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.